The champagne glasses clinked around me as I stood in the corner of the elegant ballroom, watching my colleagues celebrate what should have been one of the proudest moments of my career. Instead, my hands trembled slightly as I clutched my MBA diploma, the weight of humiliation still fresh from what had happened just minutes before on that stage. My name is Marcus Chen, and until today, I thought I understood exactly where I stood in the corporate hierarchy at Morrison Financial Group, one of Seattle's most prestigious investment firms. I had worked there for 3 years while completing my evening MBA program, grinding through 18-hour days, sacrificing weekends, relationships, and sleep to prove myself worthy of advancement in this cutthroat world of finance. Please subscribe to our channel to help us bring you more real stories like this one, and comment below to let us know where you're watching from around the world. The rain drummed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Fairmont Olympic Hotel as I replayed the moment that changed everything. During the graduation ceremony, when they announced my name and academic achievements, my boss Robert Morrison stood up from his table and declared loud enough for everyone to hear, "Well, let's see if our star student can actually handle the real world. I give him 6 months before he realizes he's in over his head. MBA or not, some people just weren't built for this business." The laughter that followed felt like acid in my veins. 3 years of dedication, of proving myself indispensable, of generating millions in revenue for his firm, all dismissed with a casual prediction of my failure. What Robert didn't know was that during those same 3 years, I had been quietly building something of my own, something that would make his words echo back at him in ways he never imagined. My journey at Morrison Financial Group began in 2019, fresh out of college with a finance degree and dreams bigger than my studio apartment in Capitol Hill. Robert Morrison was a legend in Seattle's financial district, a man who had built his firm from nothing into a powerhouse managing over $2 billion in assets. Getting hired as his junior analyst felt like winning the lottery, even if the salary barely covered my student loans and rent. The office occupied 3 floors of the Columbia Center, with views stretching across Elliott Bay to the Olympic Mountains. Every morning, I would arrive at 6:30, an hour before anyone else, preparing market reports and analyzing investment opportunities. Robert had a reputation for being demanding, but I welcomed the challenge. I believed that hard work and results would speak louder than office politics or pedigree. For the first 6 months, everything seemed to align with my expectations. I consistently delivered above-average analysis, identified several lucrative investment opportunities, and even helped close a deal that brought in $8 million in new assets under management. Robert seemed pleased with my performance, occasionally nodding approvingly when I presented findings during team meetings. The turning point came during a client presentation in early 2020. We were pitching to Pacific Northwest Technology Ventures, a consortium looking to diversify their portfolio with alternative investments. I had spent weeks researching emerging markets in sustainable technology, identifying opportunities that aligned perfectly with their values and financial goals. My presentation was comprehensive, backed by solid data, and addressed every concern they had raised in preliminary meetings. After a flawless 45-minute presentation, the clients were clearly impressed. They scheduled a follow-up meeting and indicated strong interest in moving forward with a $20 million managed account. As we walked back to the office through Pioneer Square, I felt a surge of pride, expecting some recognition for what had clearly been a successful pitch. Instead, Robert's first words were, "Next time, let me handle the closing remarks. Clients prefer to hear confidence from someone with experience, not textbook theories from someone who's never actually managed serious money." The dismissal stung, but I convinced myself it was constructive feedback from a seasoned professional. That pattern continued for months. My research would form the backbone of successful deals, but credit always flowed upward. When clients praised the quality of analysis, Robert would accept the compliments without mentioning my contributions. When investments I had recommended performed exceptionally well, the success was attributed to his strategic oversight. Meanwhile, any minor setbacks or market fluctuations somehow became teaching moments about my inexperience. The pandemic changed everything, both for the markets and for my perspective on corporate loyalty. As Seattle went into lockdown and the financial world turned upside down, I found myself working from my cramped apartment, often until midnight, helping Morrison Financial navigate the volatility while their competitors struggled. My analysis during those crucial months helped the firm not only survive but actually grow their assets under management by 15% while the broader market was in freefall. During this period, something interesting began happening in my spare time. The forced isolation and remote work had given me more flexibility in my schedule, and I started consulting for smaller investment groups and individual high-net-worth clients who couldn't afford Morrison Financial's minimum account sizes. What began as occasional weekend work gradually evolved into a steady stream of clients who valued my personalized approach and transparent communication. By late 2020, I was managing nearly $50 million in assets through these informal arrangements, charging significantly lower fees than traditional firms while still maintaining healthy profit margins. The work was energizing in a way my day job had stopped being. These clients saw me as their primary advisor, not an invisible analyst behind the scenes. They valued my insights, implemented my recommendations, and most importantly, they treated me with the respect I had been craving at Morrison Financial. The success of my side work gave me the confidence to finally enroll in the executive MBA program at the University of Washington. The decision wasn't entirely welcomed by Robert, who made several comments about employees who thought they were too good for their current positions. However, since the program was in the evenings and weekends, and my performance at work remained consistently strong, he couldn't object outright. The MBA program became my sanctuary. Surrounded by ambitious professionals from diverse industries, I found myself energized by discussions about innovation, leadership, and strategic thinking. My professors, many of whom had built successful companies themselves, encouraged the kind of forward thinking that was systematically discouraged at Morrison Financial. For the first time in years, I felt intellectually challenged and supported. My classmates came from companies like Amazon, Microsoft, Boeing, and Starbucks. During group projects and case studies, I realized how differently other organizations operated. In their companies, good ideas were celebrated regardless of who originated them. Junior employees who demonstrated exceptional performance were promoted and given increasing responsibilities. Merit and results actually mattered more than tenure and politics. One particular conversation changed my trajectory completely. Sarah Martinez, a marketing director at a major tech company, was describing how her firm had implemented a profit-sharing program that directly tied employee compensation to the value they created. She looked at me incredulously when I explained how analysts at traditional financial firms were typically compensated. "You mean you generate millions in revenue for your boss, but your salary stays the same regardless of performance? And there's no path to partnership or equity participation. Marcus, you're essentially building someone else's empire while limiting your own potential." Her words crystallized something I had been feeling but hadn't fully acknowledged. I wasn't just an employee being underappreciated. I was an entrepreneur being exploited. Every deal I researched, every client relationship I helped maintain, every strategic insight I provided was adding value to Morrison Financial, while my own professional growth remained stagnant. The realization was both liberating and terrifying. During my second year in the MBA program, I began formalizing my independent consulting work. I registered Chun Strategic Advisors as a limited liability company, obtained the necessary securities licenses, and established proper client agreements. The business grew organically through referrals, with satisfied clients recommending my services to their networks. By mid-2022, I was managing over $100 million in assets and generating more annual revenue through my own firm than Morrison Financial was paying me. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was using skills developed at Morrison Financial to compete directly with them, albeit in a different market segment. My clients were typically entrepreneurs, executives, and professionals who wanted sophisticated investment management but preferred working with someone they could actually speak to directly. They valued my responsiveness, my willingness to explain complex strategies in plain English, and my commitment to truly understanding their individual financial goals. What made the situation even more interesting was that Robert remained completely oblivious to my outside success. The compartmentalization of my professional life had become so complete that my colleagues at Morrison Financial had no idea I was operating what had effectively become a competing firm. During the day, I continued performing my analyst duties competently, contributing to the team's success while mentally preparing for my inevitable departure. The MBA program also introduced me to several potential business partners who would become crucial to my long-term strategy. David Kim, a technology consultant, helped me understand how to leverage software and automation to scale personalized financial services. Jennifer Walsh, a former marketing executive, provided insights into building a brand and client acquisition strategy that could compete with established firms. Together, we began developing a vision for what modern wealth management could look like. Our concept was simple but revolutionary. Combine the sophisticated investment strategies and fiduciary standards of traditional wealth management with the transparency, accessibility, and cost efficiency that technology could enable. Instead of requiring million-dollar minimums and charging excessive fees, we would serve successful professionals and entrepreneurs with investable assets starting at $100,000. Using a combination of direct index investing, alternative investments, and personalized financial planning. The business model was designed to be inherently scalable. By leveraging technology for portfolio management, client communication, and administrative tasks, we could offer institutional quality services at a fraction of traditional costs while still maintaining healthy profit margins. More importantly, as founders and equity holders, our compensation would directly reflect the value we created rather than being limited by arbitrary salary structures. By the time my graduation approached in May 2023, Chun Strategic Advisors had grown to manage nearly $200 million in assets with a waiting list of prospective clients. We had established relationships with institutional custodians, developed proprietary investment algorithms, and built a reputation for delivering superior risk-adjusted returns. The business was generating enough revenue to support multiple full-time professionals, and we were preparing to raise capital for expansion. The graduation ceremony was intended to be a celebration, a recognition of 2 years of academic achievement alongside professional growth. I had maintained a high grade point average while working full-time and building a business, something I was genuinely proud of accomplishing. My parents had flown in from San Francisco, my sister had driven up from Portland, and several classmates were planning to attend the reception afterward. What I hadn't anticipated was Robert's decision to attend the ceremony, something he had never done for any employee in the past. When I saw him at a prominent table near the front of the ballroom, I felt a mixture of surprise and apprehension. His presence added an uncomfortable dynamic to what should have been a purely positive experience. During the ceremony itself, everything proceeded normally until they reached my name during the individual recognition segment. The dean announced my academic achievements, including graduation with distinction and selection for the Outstanding Leadership Award. As I walked across the stage to receive my diploma, I felt genuinely proud of what I had accomplished. That's when Robert decided to make his pronouncement. As I returned to my seat, diploma in hand, he stood up from his table and projected his voice across the room. Well, let's see if our star student can actually handle the real world. I give him 6 months before he realizes he's in over his head. MBA or not, some people just weren't built for this business. The silence that followed was deafening. Hundreds of graduates, family members, and faculty turned to look at both Robert and me, trying to process what had just happened. The dean looked confused and concerned, clearly uncertain how to respond to such an inappropriate interruption. My parents looked mortified, my sister appeared angry, and my classmates seemed shocked by the public humiliation. But as I sat there, still holding my diploma, something unexpected happened. Instead of feeling devastated or embarrassed, I felt a surge of clarity and determination. Robert's words weren't just an insult. They were an opportunity. He had just provided me with the perfect catalyst for the conversation I had been planning to have with him for months. During the reception that followed, I mingled with family and friends, accepting congratulations and discussing future plans. But throughout the evening, I kept thinking about Robert's prediction and how dramatically wrong he was about my capabilities and prospects. The man who thought he was diminishing my confidence had actually crystallized my resolve to prove him spectacularly wrong. The following Monday morning, I arrived at Morrison Financial at my usual early hour, but instead of preparing market reports, I spent the time drafting my resignation letter and preparing for what would likely be one of the most important conversations of my professional life. I had rehearsed various versions of this moment, but Robert's public comments had given me the perfect opening to explain exactly why his prediction was so misguided. At 9 o'clock sharp, I knocked on Robert's office door and asked if he had a few minutes to discuss my career development. He gestured for me to sit down, probably expecting a conversation about advancement opportunities or additional responsibilities. Instead, I placed 2 documents on his desk, my formal resignation letter and a comprehensive overview of Chan Strategic Advisors' business metrics and client portfolio. "Robert," I began, "I wanted to follow up on your comments from Saturday evening about my ability to handle the real world. I thought you might be interested to know that for the past 3 years, I've been building and operating a registered investment advisory that currently manages just over $200 million in client assets." The expression on his face shifted from confusion to disbelief to something approaching panic as he scanned the documents I had provided. The numbers were all there: client accounts, asset valuations, fee revenue, operational expenses, and net profitability. Chan Strategic Advisors wasn't just a side project or a theoretical business plan. It was a fully operational competitor that had been growing steadily while I maintained my role as his analyst. "This is impossible," he said, looking up from the papers. "You work here full-time. When would you have time to manage this kind of operation? And how did you acquire this many high-net-worth clients without any established reputation or marketing budget?" I explained the timeline systematically, from my initial consulting work during the pandemic through the gradual formalization and growth of the business. I described how my MBA education had provided the strategic framework for scaling the operation and how my experience at Morrison Financial had taught me exactly what affluent clients were looking for in terms of investment sophistication and personal service. "The clients came through referrals initially," I continued. "When you provide exceptional service and generate superior returns, people naturally recommend you to their networks. Unlike traditional firms that require million-dollar minimums and charge excessive fees, we serve successful professionals and entrepreneurs who want institutional quality investment management without the institutional bureaucracy." Robert's face had gone through several color changes during my explanation, settling on an alarming shade of red that suggested elevated blood pressure. "You've been operating a competing business while working here? Do you realize this is a massive conflict of interest? This could be grounds for legal action, not to mention professional sanctions with the securities regulators." I had anticipated this response and was prepared with a comprehensive answer. "Actually, Robert, I've been extremely careful about compliance and conflict management. Chan Strategic Advisors serves a completely different market segment than Morrison Financial, with no overlap in client base or investment strategies. All of our clients have assets below your minimum threshold, so we're not competing for the same business. Additionally, I've maintained clear separation between my duties here and my outside activities, never using Morrison Financial resources, client lists, or proprietary information. The legal risks he was threatening were largely imaginary, something I had verified through extensive consultation with securities attorneys during the business formation process. Employment agreements in the financial services industry typically restrict employees from soliciting existing clients or using proprietary information to benefit competitors, but they rarely prohibit the operation of non-competing businesses that serve different markets. Furthermore, I continued, my resignation is effective immediately, so any perceived conflicts will be resolved as of today. I wanted to have this conversation as a matter of professional courtesy, to explain why your prediction about my capabilities was so fundamentally incorrect. As the reality of the situation settled in, Robert's expression evolved from anger to something more complex. He was clearly processing the implications of what I had told him, not just for our professional relationship but for his understanding of my competence and potential. The employee he had publicly dismissed as unprepared for the real world had been successfully operating a business that was generating more revenue than his own firm paid in total salaries. "I don't understand how you managed to build this without anyone knowing," he said finally. "The time commitment alone should have been impossible while maintaining your responsibilities here." The answer to that question revealed something important about efficiency and motivation that I had learned through direct experience. When you're building something for yourself, when every hour of effort directly contributes to your own success rather than someone else's profit margins, you find ways to be incredibly productive. I was working the same total number of hours, but allocating them between maintaining my performance here and growing my own business. I also explained how technology had enabled me to scale operations without the overhead structures that traditional firms required. Automated portfolio management, digital client communication platforms, and streamlined administrative processes allowed Chun Strategic Advisors to serve hundreds of clients with a fraction of the infrastructure that Morrison Financial needed for similar operations. The business model is fundamentally different, I continued. Instead of requiring large support staffs and expensive office space to create an impression of prestige, we focus on delivering superior investment returns and personalized service through efficient use of technology and direct client relationships. Our clients don't care about marble lobbies and mahogany conference rooms. They want results and responsiveness. Robert was quiet for several minutes, reviewing the financial statements and client metrics I had provided. When he finally looked up, his expression had shifted from anger to something approaching respect, though he was clearly struggling to reconcile this new information with his previous assessment of my capabilities. "What's your plan now?" he asked. "Are you going to continue operating as a small boutique firm, or do you have bigger ambitions?" This question gave me the opportunity to explain the full scope of what we were building. Chun Strategic Advisors wasn't intended to remain a small practice serving a limited client base. We had developed a scalable model that could potentially revolutionize how investment management services were delivered to the mass affluent market, the millions of successful professionals and entrepreneurs who were underserved by traditional wealth management firms. "We're preparing to raise institutional capital for expansion," I explained. "The business model has proven successful at managing $200 million in assets, and we've identified pathways to scale to multiple billions while maintaining our service quality and cost advantages. Several private equity groups have expressed interest in providing growth capital in exchange for minority equity positions." I described our expansion plans, which included recruiting additional investment professionals, developing proprietary technology platforms, and establishing offices in major metropolitan areas across the country. The goal was to become the leading alternative to traditional wealth management for successful professionals, entrepreneurs, and executives who wanted sophisticated investment strategies without the limitations and inefficiencies of established firms. "The market opportunity is enormous," I continued. "There are millions of households with investable assets between $100,000 and $5 million who are currently underserved by firms like Morrison Financial. They're either working with generalist financial advisors who lack investment sophistication, or they're paying excessive fees to access institutional strategies through traditional wealth managers." Robert listened intently as I outlined the competitive advantages that would enable Chun Strategic Advisors to capture significant market share. Lower cost structures, superior technology platforms, more responsive client service, and alignment of interests through founder ownership created a value proposition that established firms would struggle to match. "What about regulatory risks?" he asked. "The securities industry is heavily regulated, and scaling rapidly always attracts scrutiny from compliance authorities." This concern demonstrated that despite his earlier dismissiveness, Robert was beginning to take the business seriously as a potential competitor. I had spent considerable time and resources ensuring that Chun Strategic Advisors was not only compliant with current regulations, but structured to adapt quickly to changing regulatory environments. "We've built compliance into the foundation of the business, rather than treating it as an afterthought," I explained. "Our legal structure, operational procedures, and client agreements were all designed by experienced securities attorneys who specialize in registered investment advisors. We've actually maintained higher compliance standards than required, both to minimize regulatory risks and to differentiate ourselves from firms that view compliance as a cost center rather than a competitive advantage." The conversation continued for nearly an hour, covering topics ranging from investment philosophy to competitive strategy to talent acquisition. By the end, Robert's demeanor had completely transformed from the dismissive authority figure who had publicly questioned my capabilities to someone who was genuinely interested in understanding how I had built something significant without anyone recognizing what was happening. "I have to admit," he said finally, "this is not what I expected when you asked to speak with me this morning. I'm impressed by what you've accomplished, even if I'm concerned about the competitive implications for our business." His acknowledgement of the competitive threat was perhaps the most satisfying aspect of the entire conversation. 3 years earlier, I had walked into Morrison Financial as an inexperienced analyst hoping to learn from established professionals. Now I was resigning as the founder of a direct competitor that was positioned to capture significant market share from firms exactly like his. I appreciate that, Robert, and I want you to know that despite our philosophical differences about employee development and recognition, I did learn valuable skills during my time here. The experience gave me insights into client expectations and operational requirements that were crucial for building Chun's strategic advisors. As I prepared to leave his office for the final time, Robert asked one more question that revealed how significantly the conversation had changed his perspective. If you were in my position, knowing what you know now about building a competitive business in this industry, what would you do differently? The question was simultaneously an admission that he had underestimated my capabilities and a request for strategic advice from someone he now recognized as a legitimate competitor. I considered my response carefully, recognizing an opportunity to provide genuinely helpful feedback while also making a point about leadership and employee development. The most important thing would be to recognize that your best employees are likely more capable and ambitious than you realize, I said. Instead of viewing their growth and education as threats to established hierarchies, consider how to channel their energy and ideas in ways that benefit everyone. The talent that you're dismissing as unprepared for leadership might actually be your best resource for innovation and competitive advantage. I also suggested that traditional wealth management firms needed to fundamentally reconsider their business models in light of technological changes and evolving client expectations. The industry's reliance on high fees, minimum account sizes, and relationship-based rather than performance-based value propositions was becoming increasingly vulnerable to disruption from more efficient and client-focused alternatives. The clients we're serving aren't choosing us because we're cheaper, although we are, I continued. They're choosing us because we provide better service, more transparent communication, and superior investment results. Those advantages come from being structured as a modern business rather than maintaining legacy practices that served different market conditions. Walking out of Morrison Financial for the last time, I felt a profound sense of closure and anticipation. The building that had represented professional advancement and security for 3 years now seemed like a relic from an earlier phase of my career. The elevator that I had taken thousands of times carried me down to the street level where I would begin the next chapter of my professional life as a full-time entrepreneur and business owner. The Seattle skyline looked different somehow as I walked through Pioneer Square toward my car. The city that had seemed like a challenging environment where I needed to prove myself worthy of opportunities now appeared full of possibilities and potential collaborations. The rain that had been my constant companion during those early morning commutes felt refreshing rather than oppressive, washing away the last traces of my identity as someone else's employee. Over the following weeks, the transition from analyst to full-time founder required significant adjustments in both mindset and daily routines. Without the structure and predictability of corporate employment, I needed to develop new systems for time management, priority setting, and decision-making. The freedom to control my schedule and choose my projects was exhilarating, but it also required discipline and self-direction that I was still developing. The first major challenge was scaling our operations to handle the increased client load that would result from my full-time attention to business development. During the evenings and weekends when I had been building Chun strategic advisors, my time constraints had naturally limited how quickly we could grow. Now, with unlimited time to focus on expansion, I needed to develop systems and hire personnel to support rapid scaling without compromising service quality. David Kim and Jennifer Walsh, my MBA classmates who had been advising the business development strategy, formally joined Chun Strategic Advisors as equity partners, bringing their technology and marketing expertise to complement my investment management background. Together, we formed a founding team with complementary skills and shared commitment to building something significant in the wealth management industry. Our first major milestone was securing institutional funding for expansion. The track record of investment performance and client satisfaction that we had built over 3 years provided compelling evidence for potential investors who were evaluating our growth potential. After several months of due diligence and negotiation, we closed a $15 million funding round led by a private equity group that specialized in financial services companies. The capital injection enabled us to hire additional investment professionals, upgrade our technology infrastructure, and establish offices in Portland, San Francisco, and Denver. Each new market required careful analysis of local regulations, competitive landscapes, and client acquisition strategies. But the fundamental business model proved to be readily transferable across different metropolitan areas. Within 18 months of leaving Morrison Financial, Chun Strategic Advisors had grown to manage over $500 million in client assets and was generating annual revenue that exceeded what Robert's firm collected from their much larger client base. The efficiency advantages of our business model had translated into superior profitability despite our lower fee structure, validating the strategic assumptions that had guided our expansion. More importantly, the business had achieved something that I considered even more significant than financial success. We were providing genuinely superior service to clients who had been underserved by traditional wealth management firms. Client satisfaction surveys consistently showed higher ratings for responsiveness, transparency, and investment performance compared to industry benchmarks, confirming that our operational approach was creating real value rather than simply reducing costs. The professional recognition that followed was gratifying in ways that went beyond financial rewards. Industry publications began featuring Chun Strategic Advisors as an example of how technology and innovative business models were transforming wealth management. I was invited to speak at conferences about entrepreneurship in financial services and served as a guest lecturer at the University of Washington's Business School. Perhaps most satisfying was the realization that Robert's prediction had become a benchmark for measuring how dramatically wrong someone could be about another person's potential. Instead of failing within 6 months, I had built a business that was not only successful but was actively disrupting the industry that he represented. The employee he had dismissed as unprepared for the real world had become a competitor who was capturing market share from established firms like Morrison Financial. 2 years after our conversation in his office, I received an unexpected phone call from Robert. Morrison Financial was facing challenges from changing market conditions and increased competition from firms exactly like ours. Several of their largest clients had moved their assets to more cost-effective and responsive alternatives, and their traditional business model was becoming increasingly difficult to sustain. "Marcus," he said, "I've been following your success with Chun Strategic Advisors, and I have to admit that you've proven me completely wrong about your capabilities. I'm calling because I'd like to discuss the possibility of Morrison Financial acquiring your firm, or perhaps some form of strategic partnership that could benefit both organizations." The irony of the situation was almost overwhelming. The boss who had publicly predicted my failure was now seeking to benefit from the success he had claimed was impossible. The business he had dismissed as a threat to established firms had become significant enough that he was considering acquisition as a survival strategy. I listened respectfully to his proposal, which involved Morrison Financial providing capital and regulatory infrastructure in exchange for access to our technology platforms and client acquisition strategies. From a purely financial perspective, the offer was attractive and would have provided substantial returns for our original investors and founding team. However, after discussing the opportunity with my partners and advisors, we decided to decline Robert's offer and continue building Chun Strategic Advisors as an independent organization. The values and operational philosophy that had driven our success were fundamentally incompatible with the hierarchical and tradition-bound culture of firms like Morrison Financial. "I appreciate the offer, Robert," I told him during our follow-up conversation, "but I think we'll continue on our current path. We've built something special here, and I believe we can create more value for our clients and stakeholders by remaining independent and continuing to innovate rather than being absorbed into a traditional structure." His response revealed how much the industry landscape had changed during the previous few years. "I understand your decision, Marcus. To be honest, I wish I had recognized your potential earlier and found ways to channel your entrepreneurial energy within our organization rather than creating conditions that pushed you to become a competitor." That acknowledgement represented a form of vindication that went beyond financial success or professional recognition. The person who had questioned my readiness for leadership was now admitting that his own leadership had failed to retain and develop talent that could have benefited his organization. The prediction that I wouldn't last 6 months in the real world had been replaced by recognition that I had succeeded in ways he hadn't imagined possible. Today, Chun Strategic Advisors manages over $2 billion in client assets and employs more than 50 investment professionals across 7 metropolitan areas. We've maintained the values and operational principles that guided our early success while scaling to serve thousands of clients who were previously underserved by traditional wealth management firms. The business has evolved beyond my initial vision of providing better investment management to successful professionals. We've become a platform for innovation in financial services, developing proprietary technologies and investment strategies that are being adopted by other firms throughout the industry. Our success has inspired numerous entrepreneurs to challenge established practices and build client-focused alternatives to traditional business models. Looking back on that graduation ceremony and Robert's public prediction, I realize now that his words were actually a gift, albeit an unintentional one. By dismissing my potential so definitively, he freed me from any remaining loyalty to organizational structures that were limiting my growth and impact. His lack of confidence in my abilities became the catalyst for proving not just to him, but to myself that I was capable of building something significant and lasting. The lesson I've taken from this experience extends beyond entrepreneurship or career development to fundamental questions about how we evaluate potential and create environments where people can thrive. Robert's mistake wasn't just underestimating my specific capabilities. It was failing to recognize that the qualities he dismissed as inexperience were actually indicators of ambition and innovative thinking that could have benefited his organization if channeled properly. The real world that Robert thought would humble me has turned out to be exactly the environment where my skills and vision could flourish. The challenges of building a business, managing complex client relationships, and competing with established firms have been demanding, but also incredibly rewarding in ways that traditional employment never could have provided. If I could offer advice to other professionals who find themselves in similar situations, feeling undervalued or dismissed by supervisors who don't recognize their potential, it would be this: their lack of vision doesn't define your capabilities. Sometimes the greatest favor someone can do for you is to underestimate you so completely that you're motivated to prove them wrong on a scale they never imagined possible. The story that began with public humiliation at a graduation ceremony has become one of transformation, growth, and ultimately, success that exceeded everyone's expectations except my own. Robert's prediction that I wouldn't last 6 months became the foundation for building something that has lasted years and will continue growing long into the future.